Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland spent his second day in Chicago meeting with law enforcement officials. Garland spoke about the new joint federal and CPD gun trafficking strike force. This after visiting with Mayor Lori Lightfoot, Superintendent David Brown, and Illinois Senator Dick Durbin in Chicago yesterday. Garland has announced the strike forces in multiple cities to combat rising gun violence nationwide, and we'll have more on this in a moment. The state and city's COVID situation is worsening with less than a week before the massive Lollapalooza festival gets underway in Grant Park. Illinois public health officials report nearly 8,000 new COVID cases this week. That caseload is up more than threefold since the beginning of the month. Public health officials report a daily average of just under 20,000 vaccines. The 7-day test positivity rate is 3.3%, and the state reports 58% of Illinois adults are fully vaccinated to this point, with 73% having at least one shot. An effort to review some of the more controversial city monuments has stalled. This 1 year after statues of Italian explorer Christopher Columbus were removed from their pedestals, including in Grant Park. The statues have been sitting in storage as the mayor vowed a, quote, racial healing and historical reckoning project. The Chicago Monuments Commission flagged 41 monuments as, quote, problematic. The Joint Civic Committee of Italian Americans sued the city this week to have the Columbus statue in Arrigo Park reinstated. And now on to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Lourdes Duarte of WGN-TV News, Craig Delamore of WBBM News Radio, Joan Esposito of WCPT 820, and Sarah Schulte of ABC 7 Chicago. Let's get right to it. Craig Delamore, the Attorney General, is in town, second day in Chicago, in support of the anti-violence new strike force. Let's have a look at what he said.
I'm not here from Washington to tell you what to do. I'm here from Washington to find out what we can do to help you. And cooperation among all these agencies that I'm seeing around me are the key for this to work.
Coming back to his hometown, Craig Delamore, what is different about this gun strike force announced than previous efforts in previous administrations like Operation Legend under the last administration?
Well, Operation Legend was more President Trump's way of just putting boots on the ground here in more of an enforcement capacity. This strike force, the aim is really to help the feds and local government track down where the guns are coming from and to stop them that way. So it's really a different focus, but it's still personnel being put on the task, and frankly, you're not going to get very many details from them because I think a lot of that, as he said, is going to be worked out by what the local U.S. attorney can say about what's needed and what the police can say about what's needed. But I know, at least in some cases, there'll probably be some training even for local police here about some of the investigative techniques for tracking the guns down.
So they're saying they're going to beef up their gun trafficking efforts. Joan Esposito, I mean, haven't the feds been doing that over the years, trying to bring federal gun trafficking cases?
Yeah, everyone's been trying to work on this problem, and we haven't made a whole lot of progress. And I think that this strike force is a fabulous idea, but here's what I'm worried about. You know, we're already getting reports of cops being told they have to work 12-hour shifts, vacations canceled. In one instance, there was an officer who, worked 17 days without a day off. If we already don't have enough officers to do the job that's there, and now we're going to take 50 away and put them on this special force, it's a great idea, but are other parts of the city going to suffer?
Certainly a lot of officers talking about fatigue and low morale given what's going on this summer as these mass shootings continue. Lourdes Duarte, do you have any faith that what the Attorney General is talking about here, what Superintendent Brown is talking about, could put a dent in what we've seen this summer and, frankly, all this year?
Yeah, Craig brought up a really good point that we've seen operations like this before, different task forces sort of doing the same thing. This one, as he mentioned, is going to focus a little bit more on where these guns are coming from. So not just work here in Chicago, but, are there neighboring cities or neighboring states where those guns are being trafficked and brought into the Chicago area? So they'll be looking at that, which is key because you're getting at the root of the problem. But I think for the general public, they've been here before, right? They've seen situations like this before and projects and programs put in place, and maybe they initially work and they see maybe a change in numbers, but it seems like it doesn't last long enough.
And that's what Attorney General Bill Barr had said. Last year with Operation Legend, he had touted some improving numbers, but then the numbers went right back up. And as you mentioned, Lourdes, what they're saying now is they'll have jurisdiction to go to other states outside the city of Chicago to try and track some of these guns, whereas in the past perhaps they didn't as much. Sarah Schulte, like all of us, we've heard all of these things before. Do you hear anything different?
No. I mean, on the other hand, from the city's perspective, they can use all the help they can get, right? I mean, even if it's one extra ATF agent that can help the city, I mean, they can use all the help they can get, given the fact that during 4 years of the Trump administration, all they kept getting was pounded by Trump and really no help at all. So, I think from the city's perspective, I think they're going to take it and welcome it. But am I optimistic that this is going to make a dent in any of the city's violence? No, I don't. Because as we've all mentioned before, these things have been tried and nothing seems to really work.
And speaking of the police, Craig Dellimore, this week, Mayor Lightfoot and City Council passed this big new Police Civilian Oversight Commission. This has been debated for 4 years. It looked like the sides couldn't agree on anything, and then all of a sudden over the weekend, agreement emerged. How did this come together?
Well, it's come together in stages. Originally, first off, there was the original proposal, which was called GAPA, and I'm not even going to get into the acronyms. And then that was a proposal for civilian involvement. Then another proposal came along, and they were competing for a while. What changed things really was the union of those two opposing citizens groups to say, we need to do something that can work together. And plus, the election of a mayor who said she was for citizen involvement.
This was a core part of her campaign and something she recommended when she was on the police task force. But I'll throw this out to anybody. At the end of the day here, these community groups wanted the power to set policy, to hire and fire the superintendent. They sort of have that, but the mayor still retains veto power, and the mayor can even reject some of the folks that are selected as commissioners here. So is anybody surprised at what the mayor was able to negotiate in here, where the mayor does still retain ultimate authority, with city council veto as well?
Well, no, she needed the votes. I mean, and she got the votes, and I think that was part of the compromise of trying to get the votes to get this passed.
And I don't think anyone was arguing that she is the one who's going to bear the responsibility for what happens with the crime. So I think what was the most contentious thing was, in the end, who has the final say on policy, and because the policy is what's important. And really, it's going to be that commission in many ways, because if the mayor says, no, I don't like the policy you came up with, it goes to the city council, which has to answer to the voters and could vote a 3/4 majority to adopt the policy anyway.
And there might be a lot of residents out there, Joan, that say, great, new board to oversee the police department, but how does it make my streets safer in my neighborhood? What's the argument there?
Well, I think the argument has been a lot of neighborhoods have felt for a long time that they were ignored. Their voices weren't heard, their complaints weren't heard. And I think for exactly those neighborhoods that are worried about their streets being safer, this is a chance for them to have maybe not as much power as they would have had we gotten GAPA, Craig, but they have a seat at the table, they have a voice, And there's what's important is that even if their voice isn't recognized or heard by the mayor, as you said, Paris, there's a mechanism in place for other people who have to react, who have to say, yeah, I heard you, this is what I think, or this is what we're going to do, or this is what we're not going to do. So I think that there should be people in the neighborhoods, they're not going to see a change immediately, but over time, when their community leaders and their activist leaders feel that they're being heard, I think that's going to make people feel better about their relationship with the police.
And it'll be interesting to see who are the voices at the table, right? Will those people do enough work and have enough power to really generate some change? And will they reflect what the residents and the people on their blocks and their neighborhoods want to see? So I think it's one that we still have to watch for a little bit longer.
And in terms of the specifics here, it's weird about that, though. They say they're elected, but there are two representatives elected in each police district that then select a commissioner subject to mayoral approval. So it's kind of a hodgepodge here. But Lourdes, one of the things that some pro-police aldermen and the police union, what he was arguing is that, well, there's already so many layers of oversight. There's a police board, the inspector general, there's a state's attorney's office. Adding one more layer of oversight here, is it totally necessary?
Yeah, but at a time when you're seeing crime at the levels that we're seeing it, and people in these neighborhoods feel powerless oftentimes, that there's nothing that they can do, that, the control is out of their hands, this is one first step in giving them a little bit of power so that they feel more invested in those communities, if that makes sense.
And if I could just add one thing quickly, there will also be these neighborhood councils. That's actually where a lot of the real influence is going to be, because they're going to meet with their local police officers and they will be able to raise their issues and get their questions answered. And I think that's where, frankly, the most effect is going to be.
And no one can argue that increasing trust between residents and the police officers is always a good thing. And really quickly, Craig, the roll call here, the mayor got more than a 2/3 majority, including Alderman Ray Lopez, to vote in favor of this, who's been a huge critic of hers. How do you think that happened?
Because Ray Lopez is also very much anti-crime, anti-gang, and frankly, this serves his community's interest just as much as it does any other. And even he said, I'm really usually very pro-police, and he said, but I think this is pro-police. And just watch, this is what we need to restore the trust. All
right, well, we'll watch as this commission gets put together over the next several months and years. Let's move on to some of the other news. In spite of the surge in the COVID-19 Delta variant, Governor J.B. Pritzker says that it will not stop him from going to what could be the super spreader event of the summer. Take a look.
If you're vaccinated, it's safe for you to attend something like this. I intend to go to Lollapalooza. I'm bringing my wife and a few friends to Lollapalooza, so I think it's okay. But again, people need to be aware that we are not past this pandemic.
So we'll see if he attends Journey or Limp Bizkit or Foo Fighters or whoever he chooses to.
Megan Thee Stallion.
Megan Thee Stallion. Sarah Schulte, the debate is raging now. Should Lollapalooza go on? It really is too late at this point. The city officials aren't going to pull the plug, are they?
No, they're not. The mayor made that pretty clear this week. She did, she indicated that she made the decision about Lollapalooza in June when the metrics were very different. I asked her if she had to make the decision again today, would she make the same decision? She said she would. They're definitely worried. I think they're definitely concerned. There's no doubt about it. But the health commissioner, Dr. Arwady, they're really kind of counting on the protocols that Lollapalooza are going to have, which makes requiring vaccinations or testing, negative tests within 72 hours. I'm not really sure how that's all going to work, but they are hoping that it is going to work for all of this. But yeah, I think the city can't afford it economically to lose Lollapalooza for 2 summers in a row.
Certainly hotels are banking on it, restaurants.
Exactly. I think from an economic standpoint, they're going to stand by this decision and make sure this happens. Now, a lot of infectious disease doctors out there, they're not necessarily against it because they do, reiterate that this is an outdoor event. So the risk is lower because it is an outdoor event. And plus, the risk in Chicago is lower because our numbers are not as high as other states as well. I mean, Dr. Arwady said this week that she's more concerned about some of the zip codes in Chicago than she is about Lollapalooza.
Not as high as other states, but going up, and it caused CPS to announce that they will require masks for children when they come back. Lourdes, do you anticipate that being controversial among CPS parents?
Yeah, you know what? It's been controversial everywhere that they've taken it up because you've got sort of two sets of guidelines. The CDC is saying one thing, the American Pediatrics Association is saying masks for everyone, whether you're vaccinated or not. So when you've got two major agencies giving sort of opposing viewpoints, that's going to cause a little bit of issue. But at the end of the day, you know, parents want their kids to be safe, but they know that it's been 16 months, a year and a half since they've been at school, and probably it's about time that they go back because they might cause some, you know, long-term damage to their kids as they move on in school, right? So we'll see. But yeah, it is a controversial issue wherever you take it up, whether in Chicago or Barrington.
Masks have been controversial for a long time in general, and you've seen places like Los Angeles reinstitute mask mandates. Joan Esposito, should Chicago follow suit with, again, as we mentioned at the top of the show, cases up threefold from just 3 weeks ago?
Threefold, but the infection rate, the positivity rate in Chicago is only 1.9%. And that's where you sit up and take notice, but you don't have to run outside and ring the alarm bell. I think that they need to keep an eye on it. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens after Lolla, whether or not that affects our numbers. And that's pretty much all you can do. At this point in time, we're not as good as we were before, but we're still a long ways from being in bad shape.
And there are some states and areas that are in bad shape relatively right now, so we'll have to watch where that goes. Let's talk a little bit of politics. Craig Dellamore, in an announcement that surprised nobody, Governor J.B. Pritzker says he wants another term. He released a video touting his response to COVID. Is that an effective argument for another term for Governor Pritzker, his leadership during COVID?
I think it is a pretty strong argument for him, despite the fact that it made a lot of people angry, how much power he took and for how long he maintained that sole power. But still, this state has done better than a number of other states in fighting COVID. And he acknowledges that some of the things that he did may not have been the best thing to do, but he did them openly. He let people know what he was doing. And I think he's hoping that people will see that kind of decisiveness as, a plus. And let's face it, the other things that help him, like the state's credit rating going up, are going to simply add to what is already a positive popularity rating among the public.
Because he is running for re-election, I don't think we're going to see mask mandates, even whether it's statewide in schools or for everybody, anytime soon.
Yeah, it would be
interesting.
He's going
to be a little more cautious this time around because he's running for re-election.
What the politics of that would be, I mean, they would be certainly unpopular downstate. Lourdes Duarte, talking about his management of COVID-19, one of the areas that has been really controversial is the Department of Employment Security. There haven't been a lot of answers out of that office with all the fraudulent claims that happen, and with folks that just haven't been able to access the system. You did a story on that this week. Did you find anything else out?
Funny that you mentioned that, Paris, because we just worked on a story this week on that. So we have been trying for, I would say, a year now to try and get a dollar amount on how much the Department of Employment Security paid out in these fraudulent claims, these identity theft claims that so many of us have been hit with, including myself, have not been able to get a number. And so we kept trying, finally went to the Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Labor, and the number that they gave us was $14.8 million that has been reported from the state to the U.S., to the federal government. We talked to one expert who says that is just the tip of the iceberg. That's just the beginning. We think that number, when this is all said and done, fraud in Illinois through IDS will hit $1 billion. And I know it sounds like a lot, and you're probably thinking, Lourdes, what are you talking about? Just to give you some perspective, California, they were thinking that their number is going to be at about $11 billion. So that just gives you an idea of how widespread this issue is. When I asked IDS about the 14.8 million, they said, well, that's just for people who maybe were collecting unemployment and were still working. It doesn't include people who have been hit with identity theft over the course of the last year.
And you know, it isn't just a question of fraud. I get inundated, and I know my friend Terry Savage, through her helpline, gets inundated with all the people who needed unemployment and couldn't get through. Legitimately, legally needed, were entitled to it. And a lot of them gave up. I mean, the stories are heartbreaking. And I'm surprised they answered you, Lourdes, because near as I can tell, they don't answer the phones.
Well, and there's an acting director there, and we haven't had been able to get any answers either. But as best as you can tell, Lourdes, is this just because the system was overwhelmed? It wasn't prepared for this volume of unemployment claims?
And what they'll say is, yes, the volume obviously hit them at a time when I don't think any state was really prepared. It's not just Illinois, who would have expected a pandemic would leave so many people unemployed. What they're saying right now is that they're trying to figure out where the fraud is, meaning where the dollars were lost from which, federal program. So there's so many federal programs out there where people have been getting help that they're just trying to quantify what the dollars are, what it's been like. They say they keep working on the system. They're implementing different programs and projects in place to make sure that this never happens again. But I feel like we still haven't gotten sort of the solid, this is what we're doing, this is how it's working, this is how we move forward, which is, I think, what a lot of people are looking for.
Certainly a lot of questions there as Pritzker does seek re-election. And Sarah Schulte, one of the things I found notable this week, as many reporters did interviews with him, I did an interview with him, and he chose to focus on his plans for the second term for free college tuition for anybody earning the median income in Illinois, expanded health care, expanded child care, and this seems to echo the message of President Biden and Democrats nationally. Right. Do you think this is a winning message, given that we live in Illinois and every single resident knows that the state is not in the best fiscal condition?
Well, I think, but he's got to stay on message, and just kind of what you talked about. This is something that President Biden has been talking about. So I think that we'll see if it's a winning message in Illinois, but those are also issues that people care about. And, something like free tuition, people are going to wake up to that. So I think that I think those are winning issues if we can get through COVID. I mean, but if COVID is still here and numbers are going up, that will still take away from anything that he's trying to do on those issues.
Yeah, they could complicate. The politics of this could be very complicated. Let's broaden out to national politics. Joan Esposito, we saw the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy pull all of his picks for that January 6th commission after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected 2 of them. But now there's talk that Adam Kinzinger, the Illinois Republican who is harshly critical of Trump, might be placed on that panel. Should the Speaker place Kinzinger on that panel?
I think she absolutely should. Yes, he's not a Democrat. I don't think anybody would ever confuse him for a Democrat, but he is, he's a man of principle, and he doesn't believe in the big lie. He's not going to be on that committee and try to make sound bites or turn it into some kind of clown car performance the way Jim Jordan would have. I think that she would be smart to add him to the committee, and by all accounts, he wants to be on it, and I think Liz Cheney is negotiating on his behalf.
Certainly, and certainly it would give it that appearance of a bipartisan outcome, whatever they were to find. Craig Dellamore, do you believe that Kinzinger will ultimately be placed on that committee?
I think the odds are strong that he will be. However, there may be some people behind the scenes, Democrats maybe from Illinois, who might be whispering in the ears of people at the White House, listen, this guy could be a contender on the Republican side of the ledger in the next governor's race. So they may not be anxious to see him have that platform, but it may be a hard offer not to accept.
And you say that as the Democrats might, in Illinois, might draw his district, sort of draw him out of his district, basically. But you wanted to jump in? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say Kinzinger kind of already has his own platform. You know, even without that committee, he's really kind of made himself a national figure. So I'm not sure putting him on the committee is going to really, you know, give him more limelight than he already has.
And then there's a $35 million head start in fundraising that Governor Pritzker has. Craig, do you see the governor spending $170 million like he did 3 years ago?
If there is a formidable contender against him, I suspect that he would be willing to spend that much. But I think we're going to have to see how that field, even the Republican field, shakes out, because he's got the money.
The three folks on the Republican side probably won't spend that collectively. But as you said, Craig, Pritzker went up against Rauner, another Illinoisan or former Illinoisan with deep pockets last time. All right, we are out of time. So our many thanks to Lourdes Duarte, Craig Delamore, Joan Esposito, and Sarah Schulte. And that is our show for this Friday night. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe and cool this weekend, and we'll see you Monday.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal